How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I have been directed to someone else's video and asked to comment. It's about banning cash and the EU attempt to control everybody else's data and therefore their personas. Let's start with a short note about the EU. The EU, I don't get this, but most people don't seem to see that the EU is totally dysfunctional and an absolute disaster. I still come across videos of people wanting to rejoin. Why? You must be mad. The EU is a dysfunctional zone, and politically, it's a nightmare. The people running the show are power mad, not terribly bright, with the fiscal ability of a teenager with his first credit card, and, politically speaking, it's a fascist state. I mean, the Second World War was fought to get rid of a fascist state. Now, people want to sign up to it. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. What it means is the ruling class is a bunch of bullies, and the power mechanism is simple and straightforward. Do as we tell you, or we'll cut off your money. Of course, they seem to forget that they don't actually have any money, and the EU fiscal system is based on a completely screwy set of rules, which appears to be designed especially to fail. The political elite are living in a dream world almost completely divorced from reality, and they're effectively a vassal state of the USA. Pretty much the same as the UK is, but the zone consists of only 1/16 of the world's population. In other words, in terms of body count, the EU has no real power in the world at all. Economically, it's been declining year after year ever since its inception, and currently represents approximately 13%, that's 13%, of world trade. In other words, it hardly rates at all. Compare that to 1840, which I know is a long time ago, when the Port of Liverpool dealt with 40% of world trade. And you can see that the whole of Europe now only deals with a third of that. One of the major problems with the zone is that it has a cockeyed view of the important issues in the world. As I tediously complain, the area suffers from a lack of essential energy development. Without energy, a modern lifestyle fails to function. The EU is dependent on food and energy, which it has to buy from outside. Without that food and energy, it collapses. It is currently being squeezed on both those fronts. Not content with that, the political class insists on annoying the providers of that food and energy. As long as that state of affairs exists, the area will sink back into poverty. It will be a slow, painful process, and with the current political setup, that process is irreversible. Well, to anyone with their eyes open and their brains free from drug abuse, the above should be obvious. One of the political problems is the fact that the EU and, of course, the UK are political dependencies of the USA. As the US starts its steady decline, Europe really does need to divorce itself from the US hegemony and get rid of all the occupying military forces. At the moment, there is no political class in the UK, just a bunch of deaf, dumb and blind teenagers going round in circles, hardly aware they're seriously ill. In the EU, you have a bunch of neo-Nazis in control. The EU has no border controls, but it claims foreign, law-abiding citizens have to have visas to visit the place, whereas people who break the law can come in and go as they please. My friends are only allowed to visit me for up to 3 months, otherwise they need permission from Brussels. The EU finances are such that the system is bust. If, or should that be when, Russia goes onto a gold standard, the euro will head into the ditch. That could happen later this year, but who knows? The idea is on the table and the details are relatively well known. Currently, the euro only survives because there's a lot of it about. Sadly, there is not enough to pay for the political games Brussels plays, and so more and more gets printed, and that devalues the existing notes. Then there's the T2 system. Last time I looked, that was well over €1 trillion adrift, and there's no way the anomalies can be untangled. It just gets worse and worse, until something will bust. In summation, the EU in its present format is a slow-motion train wreck. If you're young and want the good life, and you live in Europe, I suggest you leave. The article I was referred to mainly concerns the banning of cash, more rubbish about global warming, and Brussels' desire to force digital identities on us. Banknotes are apparently helping to cause global warming. Do you need any other evidence to prove the Brussels elite should be confined to a suitable funny farm? The banknote issue is simply another way of banning cash. It has nothing to do with global warming. Indeed, the term global warming had to be changed to climate change because it has no basis in fact. Any idiot can claim global warming when you start the count from the Maunder period. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up, of course, but it was the time of the Great Freeze when the Thames iced over for months on end. The current temperatures are merely going back to those in Chaucer's time. Temperatures change a lot over time. They always have. It's normal. Certain sea levels do change as well, and there is not one universal sea level. I originally found that very odd, of course, but there are all sorts of things I learned governing sea levels, including global tilt, because the Earth is tilted on its axis and that wobbles a bit, variations in gravity, because that moves about a lot as well. I have high tide at the bottom of my garden. I measure it. It hasn't changed in 25 years. Sea level in Lagos, that's just down the road from me, appears to be the same as it was in 1969, when I was first there. That's according to my photos, so it could be a few inches out. But let's get to the other one. Digital ID. It's another form of surveillance. To say it has uses, yeah, it's true. But there are other non-governmental versions which are more reliable and safer. Indeed, I invested in one such several years ago when a blockchain version was announced. It's called Self-Key, and it is now publicly available. Look it up. I'll try and put a link below. Where have I got to? I've lost my place. It's still in beta format, but probably that will get sorted out over the course of this year. That's the one I will use, and it's what I suggest people who want such technology use. Handing over your entire identity to a government department. It's half-witted. You will effectively be giving your identity to a known rogue organisation. That organisation will then own you. Do you realise what that means? It turns you into a slave, as you will no longer own yourself. By all means, give your car away, but do you really want to give yourself away? Because that's what is proposed here. It's the ultimate action of a fascist regime. It turns you into a slave. Your owner will be the government. Long ago, I was mentored by a rather smart person Sir John Templeton. Look him up as well. A nice guy. Very rich, very successful, originally American, but liked the English. He taught me a whole wad of really useful information. One piece was that I should always beware of my most dangerous enemy. He asked me who I thought that was. Well, of course, I was a teenager. I think I was 15 or 16. I think I was 15. I didn't know. He claimed I would, as I grew up, find that my biggest enemy in life would be the government. And he was dead right. I could give you an example. I'll just give you one example of how it affected me. The British government distrained upon my first UK home to turn it into an army training camp. Instead of returning it when the camp closed, they sold it to a development company which built 23 bungalows on the land. That's a government for you. Right. Next week, I might present you with a section from a book I wrote last year about government. My view is we'd be better off without them altogether. But see what you think. In the meantime, have a good week. Don't give your idea away. See you next week, if we're all still here. Bye for now.